So we're in the book of Judges. We're in the book of Judges, and follow along with me in Judges chapter 18. Remember what's happening in this chapter. I feel like, it's interesting. You guys come back, you may feel like nothing has changed, but I feel like months have gone by since I've been standing here looking at you. It's odd that way life is, but I just want to say a couple things to remind you of what's happening in this chapter. Remember the tribe of Dan, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The tribe of Dan has decided that the land that God gave them through Joshua, their allotted, their apportionment, their portion of the land of Canaan, their tribal territory, they have decided it's not the land we want. It's not the land we need to go find different land. So instead of taking what God has given them, they say, nope, we don't want that. We're going to turn it in for something else. That's what's happening. They want different land with an easier people to conquer. Look what it says. Don't forget about this. Let's see if I can get my tools working again. That's an important statement I just made. They want to go somewhere where the people of the land aren't as fierce. Remember, under Joshua, God sent Israel into the land behind Joshua. Joshua had the conquest, lasted 7 years. They cut off the head of the snake, the power forces in the land of Canaan, the powerful kings that could have defeated Israel, they were all defeated by Joshua and his united Israeli army. But after that defeat, Joshua divided the land into 12 pieces. These tribes went to their own piece of land, and that's where they were supposed to live. They were supposed to go back to these pieces of land and continue the warfare, continue destroying the Canaanites, the ungodly, non-Yahweh worshiping Canaanites. They were to continue to kill them. But this is what happened in the area that Dan was given. The Amorites, it says in Judges chapter 1, verse 34, then the Amorites forced the sons of Dan. See, it should be the other way. The sons of Dan, it should read, forced the Amorites, well, into death is what it should read. But the opposite occurred. The Amorites forced the sons of Dan into the hill country, for they, the Amorites, did not allow them, the Jewish sons of Dan, to come down to the valley. God was behind the Danites. God wanted the Danites to destroy the Amorites. He says it over and over in the scriptures. When you go into the land of Canaan, kill everything that breathes. Of the 7 nations that are in the land of Canaan, you are to kill everyone that breathes. Man, woman, child, animal. And the tribe of Dan didn't do it. You can see here on this map the tribe of Dan down in the south central area on the western coast of Israel. That's where God, through Joshua, planted them. Like a farmer planting plants, this is where God had decided that the tribe of Dan should live in the land of Canaan. This was God's decision. What we see in this book, in this chapter, is the tribe of Dan sends out a group of spies, 5 spies, and they go throughout all the land. They go across this area where Mechihu lives, Micah, if you will, in the land of Ephraim. And these 5 tribes go north all the way up to the top of Israel, to the top of the promised land, and they find these people in Laish, which is the ancient name of the city of Dan. They find these people there that are easily conquerable. They couldn't conquer the Amorites. They weren't up for the fight. They didn't trust that Yahweh would back them in the fight. And so, instead of conquering the Amorites, the tribe of Dan down south allowed the Amorites to have the upper hand, allowed them to drive Dan into the hill country to the east. And what did Dan do? Instead of getting strong and going back into battle, instead of trusting in the Lord, they ran. And they wanted new land where the people weren't as mean. Israel, oh Israel, in their 5-day journey, or these 5 men in their journeys, we pick them up in Judges chapter 18, because this is what happens. While the tribe of Dan is doing all this silliness and trying to find a new land, they send out 5 spies, and that is the story of Judges chapter 18. Look what it says in verse 7. It says, "Then the 5 men departed." These are the Danites. They're of the tribe of Dan. "The 5 men departed, and they came to Laish." That is this up here. They renamed it Dan, but this should say Laish, Laish, because that was the name of the city when these 5 spies got to it. That's what's going on. "The 5 men departed, they came to Laish. They saw the people who were in it living in security, after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. For there was no ruler, no ruling nation humiliating them for anything in the land. And they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone." So the people of Laish were living in peace, and they would be an easy people for the Danites to conquer. They're living at peace, they're living in solitude, they're living quiet lives. And the tribe of Dan, these 5 spies, go out and say, "There's our mark right there. We don't want to fight the Amorites. They're too tough. That's a hard battle. We want to roll over easy people." And that's what they went to look for. Easy to defeat in battle. So the spies go back. I'm going to skip to verse 13 now. The spies go back south to Dan. They're up here at Laish. They realize, hey, this is a good mark, easy place for us to steal land, if you will. So now they've traveled back south, and they are in the tribe, or on their way to the area of Dan, to tell the people what they found. And so when they get to Dan, they encourage the leaders of the tribe of Dan to gather a 600-man army and to lead their women and children north, back up to this new area, Laish, in the north. That's what's going on. We have a tribal migration. Not all of the tribe of Dan left, but most of them left. And that's what's going on here. A tribal migration, listen again, from the place where God planted them to a place that they chose for themselves. That's not right. Verse 13, it says, they passed from there. So now they're following this 600-man army, and they passed from there. That's the southern territory of Dan. They left their God-given land. They passed from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Michaiah. That's the Hebrew pronunciation of the word that you see, Micah. So here comes this caravan of people passing near Michaiah's house. And remember who lived with him, that Levite priest. In verse 14 it says, the 5 men who had went out to spy the country of Laish said to their kinsmen, do you know that there are in these houses idols? There's an ephod, there are household idols, there's a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore consider what you should do. So the 5 spies have been through this area before. They know what the Levite priest has. They know that he's a priest in the house. They know that Michaiah has made these idols to false gods. And so the 5 spies say, listen, men, don't we need those? What should the 5 spies have said? What? Burn it down. That house is not representative of the worship of Yahweh. That house is lived in by a Jewish man and a Jewish priest, and they should know better. Burn it to the ground. But instead they said, there are idols to false gods there. We should get the idols and carry that idolatry and that idolatrous priest. We should get them and take them with us to Laish up north. We'll have a great beginning, a great start. We won't have to make our own idols. We can use these and we can worship their gods. Horrible. That's what goes on. That's what they're trying to tell the leaders, the 600 army men and everybody that's following with them. We need to take these idols so we can continue their idolatry and take their priest with us so that he can lead us in idolatry. Certainly they thought it was right, but it wasn't right. Verse 15 says, they turned aside there. They came to the house of the young man, the Levite. Remember who this Levite is? They came to the house of the young man, the Levite, the priest, to the house of Mechihu, and they asked him of his welfare. So they're speaking to Mechihu here. The 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were the sons of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. Theft, overpowering theft is in order here. That's what's going on. A strong man stealing from a weak man. That's what's going on in Israel on this day. A brother stealing from his brother. This is the tribe of Dan stealing from the tribe of Ephraim. This is brother stealing from brother. That's where Israel was during the period of the judges. Not protecting their brother, not banding together with their brother, stealing from their brother, being influenced by the idolatry of their brother, walking away from God with their brother. Verse 17 says, now the 5 men who went to spy out the land went up and they entered there. So they go into the house and they stole. It says they took by force. They took the graven image and the ephod. Remember, the ephod is the priest's garment that he wears over his robe. Colorful ephod, the high priest of Israel would have worn one. So they took the graven image, the idol. They took the ephod. They took the household idols. We don't know how many there were, but a collection for sure. And the molten image. And all the while they were stealing all these things, it says the priest stood by. He stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Mechihu's house and stole the graven image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image, the priest finally speaks up when he realizes what's going on. And his question, how profound, what are you doing? Where are you taking those things? So the men of Dan are idolaters, just like the men of Ephraim are. Just like Mechihu, Micah is an idolater. The men of Dan are idolaters. You notice that nowhere in this story do you see the name Yahweh. They never bowed down. They never asked Yahweh's opinion. Should we leave this land? Is it your intention? Is it your plan that we should leave the southern central areas along the Mediterranean coast? Are we supposed to go north and take this land from other people? Is that what you are directing us to do, Yahweh? Nobody ever asked a single question. We don't like it where we are. We want different grass. The grass is always greener, isn't it? We want to go somewhere different. We're not asking anybody anything. We are doing what's right in our own eyes. And that's why you see over and over in the book of Judges, there was no king in Israel in those days, and each man did what was right in his own eyes. If I want it, I'll take it. If it feels good, I'll do it. If I want to worship that false god, I'm on my knees. No one can stop me from doing what I want to do. Because I think it's right, it's right. Friends, I'm telling you, in the world today, we are back. We are back to Judges chapter 18. And people are doing whatever they think is right. They're doing whatever they think feels good. They are doing with whomever, whatever they want, whenever they want. We are back. I mean, the circle is absolutely completed. We are living in the days of Judges chapter 18. You wonder, Rick, why are we in these ancient 4,000-year-old stories? Because there's nothing new under the sun. We are here. And no one says, when people are questioning, well, what do you think about this? We don't have enough people saying, I will not speak to that until I've read what the Bible has to say about that. Then I'll give you my opinion. I'll tell you what God has to say about this. People don't do that. Instead of going to the scriptures that even in the churches people hardly know, I'll do what's right in my own eyes. We've talked about this before. And we are here in the world, not just in America, in the world. Our postmodern society says there is no absolute right. What do you call this? Absolute truth. And the world says there is no absolute truth. This is a story of fables, stories. There is no truth. There is nothing that you can say, this is absolutely eternally right, and this is absolutely eternally wrong. The world says there is none of that. And God, in the person of Jesus Christ, screamed out what? I am the truth. There is absolute truth. But in the book of Judges, just like today, people were saying, there is no truth. You do you, boo, and I'll do me. Isn't that what you hear on TV? You believe what you believe, and that's good for you. I'll believe what I believe, and that's good for me. And that's exactly what we're living in. A postmodern world where there is no absolute truth. You can't say there is a God who loves you and His name is Jesus Christ and He died on the cross for you. You can't say that in this world without being bombarded with hate. Because that is a truth statement. There is a God. I'm unequivocal about it. There is a Creator and He loves you. And I'm not questioning that. I'm unequivocal about it. There is a God who exists, who always has, and He loves you. And you can't get out of that truth. But people say, no, I don't really believe in your God. I don't think that's true. Is it true? It is true. But people are trying to say, you have your truth, I have my truth, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. That is not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches emphatically that there is truth. The Savior of the world even said of Himself, I am the truth. We got a mess going on, guys. We got a mess going on. Stand firm, hold firm to the truth that you know. The world is trying to pick away. The world is trying to pick away at our truth, at what we know the Bible teaches to be true. It's trying to get us to compromise. One little thing at a time, it's trying to destroy the fabric of Christianity. One little truth at a time. Let's keep going. I want a rabbit trail here, but I want to get through this. Let's keep going here. I just want you to know these stories are relevant to the days in which we live because we have devolved back into who these people are. You say, oh, these Jews, they're so horrible the way they turned away from God. Friends, drive down your street and look around. These aren't horrible Jews. These are just people with free wills that are choosing to turn away from God, just like your neighbors are. Just like, unfortunately, from time to time, we are in our personal walk with God. We're not perfect. We fail and fall and stumble just like all the rest. We love God and want to follow Him and please Him, but that doesn't mean we do it perfectly. But good night, if you look around, we are living in the days when people say, I'm going to do things my way and I don't care what the consequences are, because there are none. They don't believe there is a God who holds them accountable for anything. It's just the same thing going on here. Nothing new under the sun. Only the names have changed. So the priest is asking, what's going on here? Why are you taking the idols? And this is what they said to him in verse 19. The 600-man army, the 5 spies who have stolen the idols say, shh, sneak away with us. Don't speak out against us. Look what they say, be silent. Put your hand over your mouth. Come with us. Don't you see the opportunity? Come with us and be a father to us, a leader, an authority in the spiritual realm, not a father, of biological father, but be to us a father and a priest. And listen to the question, listen to what they dangle in front of him. Is it better for you to be a priest to a house of one man? Or, look what we have to offer you. Is it better to be a priest to a whole tribe and a family in Israel? Be the priest of the tribe of Dan. And that was just enough for this guy to say, that sounds great. That's what I'll do. No loyalty. No loyalty to Michaihu. No loyalty to what he had signed on to. No 2 weeks notice, if you will. Got a better offer, and this guy jumped ship. Remember who this man is, the Levite? You remember who he is? Somebody tell me who he is. Who is this man? He's the grandson of Moses. That's who he is. This is how far Israel had fallen. He's the grandson of Moses, the one who received the law from God, the right way to properly worship God. Moses. 2 generations, and we've got this guy. The priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod because he was in control of the spiritual affairs of the house. It's blamed on him. The theft of the ephod and the household items fall on his shoulders, if you will. The blood is on his hands. The priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod and the household items and the graven image and went among the people. So they have stolen it from the house, and he takes personal possession of it and says, I'll carry these things. Moses' grandson. It says they turned and departed, and they put the little ones and the livestock and the valuables in front of them. So the army who was leading the way, all of a sudden, as they lead Ephraim's territory and Micah's house, they go behind the children and the women and the valuables, because they assume that Micah's house and the men of Ephraim will respond. They're just not going to let their idols be stolen. There will be a response. And so, as the good military men do, they take the rear flank and say, we'll take them when they approach from the rear. We will defeat them from the rear. That's why they do this. Verse 22 says, when they had gone some distance from the house of Michaihu, the men who were in the houses near Michaihu's house assembled and overtook the sons of Dan. You can't just come into my house and steal stuff and expect there to be no response. There will be a response. And so the men of the tribe of Ephraim gathered together to respond to their brothers, the Danites, who have stolen from them. They're easily able to catch up with this throng. Remember who's traveling: men, women, animals, livelihood, livestock, cattle. All these things are making this slow migration north. So this small group with Micah was easily able to catch them. And they did catch them. And look what it says in verse 23. They cried to the sons of Dan. Interesting that the men of Ephraim didn't immediately take up arms and say, let's go, let's fight. We will kill you to get our idols back. No, they spoke first. They cried to the sons of Dan, who turned around, and they said to Michaihu, what's the matter with you that you have assembled together? Like, are you out of your mind? Why are you chasing us? And Michaihu said to them, listen to the pathetic statement that a Jew, a man of Israel, a man of the people of God says. He says, you have taken away my gods which I made. Wow. Where's Yahweh in this conversation? Where's the one true God? Where's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Where is God, creator, in this conversation? What's he whining about? His little false god idols. You've taken away my gods which I made, and the priest, the Levite, Moses' grandson, and you have gone away. And what do I have besides? You've stolen everything from me. Where is the Jew, the man of God? Remember, I showed you in a different passage in Zechariah chapter 8 that there will come a time when the Gentiles, when 10 Gentiles will grab the robe of one Jew and say, please take us with you to worship your God, for we have heard that your God is with you. Not on this day. The Jews instead, the Jew Micah, Michaihu, instead of coming to his senses and realizing, I have been worshiping false gods, Thank you, Yahweh, for having rid my house of them. Thank you for cleansing my area of this false god shrine that I made. Instead of it snapping into his head, I have done wrong. I should be worshiping Yahweh. Instead, he goes crying after his idols and saying, you've left me with nothing. You've stripped me of everything. How could I live? A man of God. A Jew, supposed to be gathering the Gentiles to the worship of Yahweh through the relationship that the Jew has with Israel. But the relationship is so absolutely broken during this time that no one can look at this Jewish man, Micah, and say, I want the relationship with God that you have. I wonder if Christianity in America is faltering to the state that people can't look at the Christian and say, I want the relationship that you have with God. I want what you have. I want your stability. I want your peace. I want your steadfastness, your firmness in trial. I want what you have. I can see it in you. You're like a light on a hill. I can see you from miles away. Or I wonder if instead what we're seeing is the Christian meld into the society so well that we can't even be told one from the other. Which do you think is more true? So Micah falls. What do I have besides my idols and my priest? Well, you have the promises of God to Abraham of a land, a seed, and a blessing. You have an eternal kingdom. You have the promise. What do you have? You have the tabernacle. You have the high priesthood. You have Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. You have the blood sacrifices. You have your sins being atoned to and forgiven. And you have the audacity to come and say, what do I have? You've stripped me of everything because I took a bunch of idols from your house? Israel has fallen, my friends. Fallen. So he says to them, how can you say to me, what's the matter with you? I have another question. Why did Micah make the false gods? To worship them, but for what? What were gods supposed to do for people? They were supposed to give them things like fertile crops and rain. And what else were they supposed to do? They're supposed to protect. Isn't a God supposed to be strong enough to protect at least himself? And here we have these false gods of Micah's being stolen by another tribe of Israel? What kind of gods are these? They can't even stay in the place where they want to be. They can't even stay in the land of Ephraim. They've been stolen. The whole system of false god worship breaks down in this story because the gods aren't even strong enough to protect themselves. The false gods. And Micah doesn't see that. It's unfortunate that he's been so blinded by his lies and his idolatry that he doesn't snap out of it when God takes those idols from his house. Instead, he goes crawling after them like a child who's lost his favorite toy. What about the Levite? Again, just to mention the Levite, the young man, Moses' grandson. What about him? It says in this story that Mechihu treated him like a son, invited him into his family, almost adopted him, treated like one of his own. What happens as soon as he gets a better offer? Gone. No conversation with Mechihu. No conversation about, look, this is what you have to offer, but this is what the tribe of Dan has to offer. No conversation, no loyalty, no genuineness, no love, no gratitude for what Micah had done for him. A better offer comes, gone. Our workforce is becoming much like that. Nothing new under the sun. So the men of Dan, as we see in verse 25, they respond to Micah's pathetic plea. You've taken all my false idols and left me with nothing. It says the sons of Dan said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us. Silence. Or else fierce men will fall upon you and you will lose your life with the lives of your household. We will kill you and not think twice about it, Micah. Brother or not. We have this mini civil war going on here in the area of Israel where the Danites are threatening to kill their brother, the Ephraimites. violence, a threat of death, an immediate threat of death. So what happens in verse 26? So the sons of Dan went on their way, because this small group of Micahs wasn't strong enough to do anything. The sons of Dan went on their way, on their trek to the north that you see here, so they could resettle themselves in this area of Laish up north. The sons of Dan went on their way, and when Micaiah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Now, I want to ask you, put on your memory caps here for a second. Remember what Micah's response was when he found that priest, that Levite, who just happened to wander into his house one day? Remember what Micah's response was? I'm going to show it to you in Judges 17, verse 13. Then Micaiah said, "Now I know that Yahweh will prosper me, seeing I have a Levite as priest." Micah's initial thought was, I've got a Levite, I've got my little temple that I've set up in my house, my little house shrine. I've got my household items, one of which my mother made for me and gave me. I have all these things, and now I have a Levite. I have one from the tribe of Levi. I have a Jewish priest who's agreed to be my personal priest. Surely now Yahweh will prosper me. He has to. But what does it say in verse 26? So the sons of Dan went on their way. When Micaiah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. What did he take back with him? Nothing. He didn't get his idols back. He didn't get his ephod back. He didn't get his little household shrine back. And he didn't get his Levite back. So what about this statement that he says in Judges 17:13? Surely now that I have a Levite as priest, God has to prosper me. Did God prosper him? Or did God take everything that he had? Everything in his false worship system, God ripped out of his life. And I'm telling you, this guy Micah, we don't know the rest of the story in Micah's life, but I pray that one day this guy saw the light and realized the gift that Yahweh had given him when he cleansed his house of idolatry. God did not prosper him because he was doing something wrong. He was trying to worship Yahweh, but he was doing it in a wrong way. You worship Yahweh at the tabernacle. You bring your sacrifices to the tabernacle, which was set up in Shiloh at this time. You go through the priests, the Levite, the priests at the tabernacle. You bring your animal sacrifices to the tabernacle. You don't make any idols of Yahweh or any other god. That's not proper worship. But this guy thinks he's properly worshiping God. Let me remind you of this statement. I haven't made it in a while, but it's poignant. It's so very, very true, and I think this is the problem that we see today in Christianity so much. Here's the statement. I should have written it down. The problem we have is that people think, or people know just enough about a subject to think they're right. That's this guy, Micah. He knows just enough about a subject to think he is right. I want to worship Yahweh. That's the right God, Yahweh. But I want to do it on my terms. I want to worship Him in my house, with my house of God, my little house shrine. I want to worship Him through idols. I want to worship Him through the ephod that I've created. And I want to worship Him through a priest that I chose for myself. I want to worship Yahweh my way. You see? He knows just enough about a statement to think he is right. But here's the problem. He doesn't know enough about the subject to know that he is actually wrong. See that? You know just enough about something to where you declare, I am right, I know I'm right. But if you just kept turning the pages of the book, you'd realize, oh, I'm wrong. And we see that in every major battle that we're fighting, in every major social battle that we're fighting in America, you've got people on both sides of the aisle that know, that are convinced they are right. Only one side knows just enough about a subject to think they're right, and the other side knows enough about the subject to know that those people are actually wrong. That's the struggle. Have you ever had an argument, spiritual, godly, or otherwise, where the person you were arguing with didn't think they were absolutely right? No, they think they are absolutely right. They just don't know enough about this book to know they're wrong. And in a spiritual sense, that's the great danger. You have these churches turning away from things like the promises God made to Israel as an example. How long are the promises that God made to Israel to be in effect? For how long? Until when? How long are the promises that God made to Abraham that He would plant them in the land, that He would give him an authoritative kingdom? How long is that supposed to last? How long? Is it forever? Or is somewhere in the Bible, is there something about no, when the Jews reject Jesus, I am finished with them? Which is true? Which is true? Is it forever? Or is there a date when God told Israel, Abraham, your people will sin after you and fall, just like He told Moses in Deuteronomy. Your people that come after you will sin, they'll walk away from me, they'll become idolaters. And one day I will renege on every promise that I have made to this stubborn, obstinate people. Which is true. Now don't be shy today. Be bold. You know the truth. I'm hearing it. But you see, we've got these churches and we've got these people that know just enough about the subject to think they're right. But they don't know the beginning, the black cover to the other black cover. They don't know the whole story of the Scripture. So they don't realize that in truth, they're wrong. So you've got pulpits and denominations. I'll name you a few just because I can. And you should know the names. The Roman Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Methodist Church, who believes with all their heart, because they don't know better, that God has replaced Israel with the church. That the church is true Israel, spiritual Israel, and that God's plan for Israel has ended and will never see any fruit. Is that true or is that false? That's absolutely a lie from the pits of hell. If God makes a promise to Abraham and a promise to David and says, forever your throne will have a man on it, for one day God to say, you know what, you've gone too far, I'm going to take that promise from you, is for us to stand here as Christians and say, now wait a minute. He's made us some pretty strong promises also, has He not? Is there a day coming when God says, nope, Rick, you've gone too far. I told you that I held you in the palm of my hand. I take it back. I'm releasing you. You want to worship that God? It's not God. It's not God. He's a promise keeper. Everything that He's ever said in the Scripture will come true. One day Jesus Christ will return to this earth at the second coming. At the battle of Armageddon, He will defeat all unbelief, and He will take His throne, the throne of King David, a promise that Yahweh made to David in the book of 2 Samuel chapter 7. Jesus Christ will be the fulfillment. Jesus Christ will be the one whom the Ancient of Days from Daniel chapter 7, the one to whom a kingdom is given. He will be Shiloh, the one to whom the right belongs to rule. And Jesus will rule as the King of Israel for 1,000 years. Is it true? Yes, it's true. Every promise that God has ever made will come true. Every promise that He made to Israel remains a promise to Israel. Read Romans chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 11. Paul plays it out so perfectly, so clearly. For anyone to think that God has replaced Israel with the church is an abomination. Not true. But that's what you have then. In Micah's eyes, it's what you have now. He knows just enough about a subject to think he's true. I know we're supposed to worship Yahweh. I know that there's supposed to be a priest involved. And I know that the priests are supposed to come from Levi. That's all he knows. So what does he do? He sets up his own tabernacle in his house, finds his own priest, and says, certainly God will be pleased with this. What should he have done? Learn the rest of the Bible. That's what he should have done. He should have found a priest that could teach him, not Moses, his grandson that was apostate. He should have found him a priest that could teach him the writings of Moses, the Mosaic law, and worship God properly. He didn't know enough about the Mosaic law to know he was wrong. But on this day, in verse 26, it's all taken from him. Verse 27, then they took what Michaiah had made, the ephod, the idols, and the priest who had belonged to him, and they came to Laish. They finished their trek to the north to a people quiet and secure, and they struck them with the edge of the sword, and they burned the city with fire. Why didn't they do this in the south? Well, all of a sudden they're fierce, courageous. They struck them with the edge of the sword. Why didn't they strike the Amorites with the edge of the sword? Well, that would have been a hard fight. But you go up here to these quiet people, these people living in solitude, these farmers, these agrarians who aren't ready for war, don't have implements of war, don't have an organized army, and you roll over them without a shot fired. A simple battle. They didn't want to do what God told them to do and go fight the Amorites in the south. In the land that I've given you, they chose to do it a different way. Verse 28 says, there was no one to deliver them. These poor people in Laish, there was no one to deliver them because it was far from Sidon. So they couldn't call to the Sidonians to come. It would have taken too long for them to get there. They had no dealings with anyone. I mean, they were sitting ducks. It was in the valley, which is near Beth Rehob, and they rebuilt the city and they lived in it. So the tribe of Dan has decided we're leaving the place where God planted us. We're going to go steal a new territory where there's peaceful people, and the war will be easy. And they burned their city down, and what do you see after that? They rebuilt the city and they lived in it. They stole it. There's no other way to say that. They stole land that God didn't give them. They called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born in Israel, the son of Jacob. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. So the historical name of the city was Laish. But again, listen, do you hear any thanksgiving? Do you hear them making an altar and burning incense and burning animals and offerings to Yahweh God who'd given them this new land? You don't hear anything about Yahweh here, and that's the tale of the story. They had so thoroughly walked away from the worship of Yahweh that He's not even in their conscience, in their conversation. That's why this story is here, to show the spiritual decline of Israel during this period. That's why Judges 17 to 21 are in the book, to show you what the Israelites were thinking. And this is what they were thinking. The sons of Dan set up for themselves the graven image. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Because they thought they were right. They didn't know enough about the subject. They didn't care to educate themselves on the subject. So they thought they were properly worshiping God by setting up this stupid ephod, an image. The sons of Dan set up for themselves the graven image. And Jonathan, here we finally are given the name of the Levite, the young man, the priest, Jonathan, Yonatan. And it says here he's the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, Manasseh. He and his sons were priests. Look how long they entered into this agreement with Israel, or with the sons of Dan. It says he, Jonathan, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. For generations they stayed to be priests. You say, but wait a minute, Rick. We have a different name. We don't see Moses here. We see the name Manasseh. I want to show you some Hebrew quickly because I'm out of time. I'm telling you that a Hebrew scribe changed this name. We very much know that Moses had 3 sons and one of their names was Gershom. That's this boy, Gershom. We see him written right here. But I want to show you, this is the Hebrew. Hebrew's read from right to left. This is the M, this is the N, the SH, and the A at the end, the AH, Menashe. These are the vowel points, these dots. But this is the word, M-N-S-H-A-H. Look at the word for Moses. M-S-H. Look at the characters. You've got the M, you've got the Shin, the S-H, you've got the Hey right here. The only thing that's missing is this little guy, this little guy right here, the new, the N. All that scribe had to do to protect the name of the blessed Father Moses. Because when he got to this, he just couldn't see fit to write that this idolatrous priest was the grandson of the great man Moses. Just added one little character in there. You don't see this in every manuscript. Some of them you very clearly see Moses, Moshe. But not in this one, you see Manasseh. They changed the name. What do you see in the movies? The names have been changed to protect the innocent. That's what this scribe tried to do. He tried to change that name to protect the innocent. And dear Moses, the father of the Jews, the father of the law, the giver, the taker, the receiver of the Mosaic law, directly face to face from God, his name is changed to Manasseh. When you read about Manasseh, you say, Rick, that's flimsy proof. No, it's not. Because Manasseh never had a son named Gershom. The Jews are a people of great genealogy, and I could show you genealogies that show that Manasseh's children were not. There was no child in Manasseh's line named Gershom. But Moses had a son named Gershom very clearly. They changed his name to protect the innocent. This is the grandson of Moses. Verse 31 says, so they set up for themselves Mechihu's graven image, which he had made all the time that the house of God was at Shiloh. Read that last line. They set up in the northern part of Israel, they set up Micah's graven image, which he had made, and at the same time, while they were setting up a false altar to Yahweh in the north, at the same time, the actual proper God-ordained house was at Shiloh. The tabernacle stood during those times. Remember the remnant. There was always a faithful Jewish remnant, and there was a faithful Jewish remnant at Shiloh that had a priest, the priesthood, the Levites, the high priest, the animal sacrifices, the incense, the table of showbread, the lampstand, the menorah, all the proper things and the proper ways to worship God were going on in Shiloh. But in Dan, in the north, the tribe of Dan was setting up national idolatry. That's the contrast and the reason it's stated like that. While Dan is setting up a national idolatrous altar, Yahweh was still being worshipped at Shiloh at the tabernacle. We'll pick up there next time. I'm out of time.